And the ranking member for any questions you may have for the panel.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me welcome the panel. Finally, a panel that includes people who are in charge around here. Dr. Burgess just went through wistfully all the things that used to be and things that he wished were in place today. You all have as well, but I'll remind you, you're in charge. I mean, you can't blame Nancy Pelosi for this. You can't blame Joe Biden for this. The Republicans control the House of Representatives. You can have as many open or closed rules as you want. I mean, not only has the appropriations process been a complete mess, but the process in general has. I mean, and this is not a slight to my friend, Mr. Cole, because I know he is on the side of more openness, but there have been 37 completely closed rules this year. That's more closed rules to date than the previous two Congresses. On amendments, this Congress, 73% of amendments have been blocked. Over 61% of Republican amendments have been blocked. And so, I point that out. But what I'm trying to figure out here is like where we are and where are we going. So these appropriation bills are being brought up one by one, which I think is the way they should be brought up. But there are still a couple of, I think it's 2 appropriation bills that haven't been reported out of committee yet, okay? So we're not going to get to all 12, no matter how fast we move next week. And if you were here earlier, I mean, obviously, there is disagreement with the White House on the substance of some of these bills. There's disagreement with Senate Democrats on some of these bills. There's disagreement with Senate Republicans on some of these bills. So there is going to have to be this kind of give and take. And I don't think under any scenario do we pass 12 appropriation bills next week. The Senate does the same. We reconcile the differences, and we have our product. The government shuts down a week from tomorrow if we don't do anything. And we've had a couple of attempts at a continuing resolution that have been brought before the Rules Committee. Continuing resolutions that in my opinion, don't reflect my values. I couldn't vote for them because of the deep cuts, but nonetheless, they were brought up here, and then they were pulled. So I'm just trying to figure out, given the realities that we're dealing with and the moment of time we're in, are all of you going to vote for a continuing resolution?
Tell you, if you don't mind yielding.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. McGovern, I'm not going to vote for a continuing resolution. We got to break the fever. We got to kick the habit. The reality we face is a $33 trillion debt that both parties have contributed to, that neither party has developed a process to constrain since the mid-90s. But I would point to the fact that in the mid-90s, when we had divided government, when we had a President Clinton and Speaker Gingrich, we were able to go through this process. And I would observe that even if we had to endure a small shutdown, a week, that the work that we could do to get these individual bills out and negotiated in divided government would be worth it. And I don't favor a shutdown. I want to move as fast as possible. We may even have bipartisan agreement to move faster than we have in the past. There's no question that you're right, that there is no one that we can blame the lack of the production of these bills on but ourselves. And I own that as a Republican, but as I think Mr. Cole correctly observed, we've been following a bipartisan tradition. And I think that this system, that this rule that the committee, I hope passes, and I hope the House passes, gets us back on a track where we negotiate these things in the way that Mr. Burgess reflected on, not negotiating what feature of a continuing resolution is or is not going to be part of that calculus.
No, I want to, yeah, I want to. Everybody can answer. I want a process in which we do that as well. But I'm looking at the date and when time runs out, and so that is, I mean, that is where I appreciate your candor, the appropriate and you're in charge. You bring what appropriation bills you want to bring to the floor. I would just argue what was a little bit different is I think there was a lot more discussion across party lines in previous Congresses, quite frankly, to get to deals, whether they're continuing resolutions or whether they're omnibus bills, which we would want to move away from. And I'm just telling you right now, there's no discussions between your leadership and Democrats in the House, nor do I know that there's any.
Mr. Chairman, we don't intend to leave it to our leadership.
I know, I appreciate that, yeah. Yeah.
I thank the ranking member for asking the question. With all of the support of continuing resolution, let me say that I don't know of any Republican in our conference that supports continuing the policies and spending levels of the Pelosi leadership from last year. That's what a continuing resolution is. You're resolved to continue existing policies and spendings. We do support a funding resolution that temporarily funds the government while we work through the differences that the ranking member rightfully pointed out at a greatly reduced spending level, and including in significantly changed policy in that we attach major border security legislation to the funding resolution. So your question was posed as yes or no,
Yeah.
but the answer is that I certainly oppose a continuing resolution. However, we do have an alternative, and many Republicans support that alternative. This is a good example right now of a variance from within the Republican conference, but we are working through those
Well,
differences.
where is your continuing resolution that you would, where is the draft?
There's no continuance.
Well,
of-
we call it a CR, you can call it whatever you want, but to keep, so the government doesn't shut down, where is your
Well, I'm
bill?
just using the English language
Yeah, no,
appropriately,
I'm from
Mr. Ranking
Massachusetts.
Member,
We're a little bit-
respectfully.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm going to let everybody speak. I'm just trying to get a, so where is your bill to prevent the government from shutting down? I just want to see what it is.
We're working
So we'll see
through
it.
that as a conference
Okay, so we will
to
see
the
that
best of our ability to arrive at 218 votes from within our conference
Okay.
to fund the government, a funding resolution that significantly reduced spending with incredibly significant border security attached, and send that to the Senate. This work,
and then
the
we'll go to this-
appropriations bill work, if I may conclude my statement, the appropriations bill work must move forward and ancillary to our negotiations within our conference to support, to find a consensus for a funding resolution that significantly reduces spending and takes care of border security. And I yield.
Yeah, and I would just say that we all believe that these bills should go separately in a perfect world. That's not where we are right now. So this bill to prevent the government from shutting down, which nobody has seen yet, that you're going to work out in the next few days, which I assume if it's reflective of what's in these appropriations bills, will probably not fly amongst, forget Senate Democrats, even Senate Republicans. There'll be another bill here. I just want to make sure that whatever comes back gets scheduled, and then we have an opportunity to vote on it. So Mr. Gaetz is no on a stopgap measure to keep the government running. I'll put you down as a maybe, depending on whatever it is. Ms. Sparks?
Well, I want to share some things. I actually frustrated that we are where we are, but you know what? Sometimes crisis and frustration maybe can learn us that we need to do better. And I hope we will do better than we've done for many years when we've governed through crises and through continuous resolutions. So my position, I am very reluctant to do that, but if we're really truly doing some work, I'm willing to support short-term extension of funding, but we do need to come together on a few very material issues. To secure our border should be bipartisan consensus and have better solution to move the needle on debt. We should have a debt commission that look at some things, and you know what? Some things might take a president with vision and backbone to do, but some things we can. We have abuse in the system, and some of the programs are, being abused by very large stakeholders that are, feeling pretty good in Washington, D.C. But we need to start looking on some and find it shouldn't be a partisan issue because it's a national security issue. So I actually reach out And there are some agreement even among Democrats on, problem solvers. I reach out to Senate, and I'm reaching out to Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans. I say, you know what? If the Senate doesn't want to deal with that, then be honest. And don't campaign that you care about 30 trillion of debt. Just be honest and say, I do not care. We'll let our republic fall. And we'll be spending interest to China. We'll spend on interest more than on national defense very shortly. Our debt to GDP ratio will be higher soon after than World War II. This is national security crisis. So national security crisis is at the border. And national security crisis with our debt should be two issues that Republican and Democrats should come together for this country. And I hope we're going to have this moving forward.
Ms. Boebert?
Would the gentleman yield?
Yeah, happy to yield.
I want to thank you for doing the whip count for Whip Emmer and myself.
So we have one no, one maybe, and one yes.
And also, the lawyer in me is screaming to say this. I just want to let my friendly witnesses know you do not have to answer that question. I yield back.
Yes, thank you. Well, and Mr. Ranking Member, I was going to inform you that I do not allow our own whip team to whip my votes. So I'm not going to completely indulge in that. But we are here to get this process done. I hope that the Senate can move as quickly as we endeavor to get these 12 individual single subject appropriations bills passed, signed into law. Let's get it done.
And you agree with me they won't be done by next week?
I think that we could, if we actually buckle down and do it. Has notice been given in the committee for the other two? Okay, so we have two that have been noticed, two appropriations bills that have been noticed, and hopefully we could get those to the floor and get these passed. As my colleague, Mr. Gaetz said, we may see a very short-term shutdown. None of us want that. None of us want a government shutdown at all. But we would encourage the Senate to work very, very quickly so we can get this done. We are willing to stay here as long as it takes to actually pass these. And as my colleague from Arizona, Eli Crane, states that nothing changes up here without force. Things may get a little bit uncomfortable, but we are going to change the status quo of what is happening here. And I'm not saying one way or another how to avoid a government shutdown, but we have to send these 12 individual bills without a companion CR, because that's exactly what the Senate is going to grab onto. If we send both of those over at the same time, the 12 individual bills and the CR, the Senate's going to ignore the 12 bills and say only focus on the CR. We know how the Senate works.
And I appreciate
And we're not
that, but
doing
as I said before, I mean, if this were a more serious effort, this would have been done in July.
It certainly should have been done in July, you're correct.
So here we are. Mr. Biggs?
Thanks for the question. It's the one question I anticipated from you, Mr. Ranking Member.
And I want to thank you for acknowledging that I made your amendments in order.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
and I appreciate
But you know
that.
what? But I was a little shocked that you wanted to cut the McGovern-Dole program. I didn't think that was really.
I thought it was a different McGovern.
It's my bill named after another.
There's not a great deal of difference.
You may be right. So I also am a non-whipper. But I will say this. I want to express this because I think it conveys my thoughts on this. Economist Kenneth Arrow won a Nobel Prize for a theory that he called increasing returns or path dependence. And what it was why he was studying why do leaders make clearly suboptimal decisions over and over again. And his conclusion was they build up regimes, institutions, rules that actually reinforce the bad decision. So if you're first out of the gate and you get locked in, the better decision comes along. And he's talking about economic actors, but I apply it to political actors in some of the work I've done. And the reality is the short-term exit cost is so painful, even though it's intense. Let's put it intense, better than painful. The short-term cost is so intense that the decision makers say, well, we'd rather stay on this suboptimal path than take a short-term intense displeasure to move to a more optimal path. And what I'm telling you is what I have seen in this body, from both sides, both sides, maybe I'm part of the problem, is that we tend to stay on a suboptimal path because we are so afraid of either a political outcome that will be disadvantageous to us personally, or because we feel that, you know, sometimes it's, and I don't want to impugn motives.
No.
Sometimes I think that the motives are very sincere and very real, but it actually reinforces the suboptimal path. And I think we are on a suboptimal path, and I have never seen, to my recollection in 7 years, 12 bills that we actually did, got them done on time, and moved them in a normal path. And I don't know how you get there because people are so concerned about a short-term intense.
Well, I'll just say that, I mean, on the agricultural appropriations bill, that was supposed to go to the floor.
Agree.
And it got pulled, I assume, because you didn't
I don't
have
know.
the votes, right? I mean, so that, but, so, I mean, it's a challenge to get the votes. But I hear, and look, I think a government shutdown, even if it's short-term, is a disaster. And sometimes disaster doesn't lead to salvation. Sometimes disaster leads to disaster. And so, you know, and I'll let Mr. Rosendale, he might speak.
Short answer is no. The short answer is no. I think
You will not-
that we were brought
Let me
here.
just make sure I understand. The question was, would you vote for a?
The short answer for a continuing resolution is no.
Okay, all right,
Okay?
thank you, okay.
The
right,
thing is that we were brought here to have discussions and debate about appropriation bills. And I think that part of the problem is that we have spent the last several months focusing energy, attention, and effort on trying to replicate the very failed system that everybody has been talking about here for the last hour. Why would we try to replicate the failed system that everybody has talked about for the last hour when Chairman Cole has talked about how it used to be and how it functioned and how productive it was across the party lines? And Mr. Burgess was talking about, he came in as an alumni with him, how productive it was. That is exactly what we fought so hard for back in January to try and restore. And that's what I stood on the floor and said. The American people think that this is what is taking place every single solitary day on the floor of the House of Representatives. This debate, this discussion, this collaboration so that we can craft proper legislation. Because I will tell you, I am more than glad to go down onto the floor and debate and discuss any of our policies against any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because I truly believe that my ideas of free markets and personal responsibility and limited government will beat your ideas every single day. And the American people will stick with me on that. And I came in here today to talk about properly funding government in a transparent and responsible fashion, and that is using the 12 appropriation bills. And that's what I plan to do, and I will stay here with you folks and anyone else who desires to do so for as long as that takes. And I don't think that there is an extreme pain, okay, if the government doesn't have the additional funding by September the 30th. That is a ruse. That is a decoy, and that is a distraction, and it will be uncomfortable for some people, but it is not going to be Armageddon or the end of Earth. And so let's stay here and work on the 12 appropriation bills and fund government properly.
And let's just be clear.
I yield back.
It's not even about additional funding, it's about any funding. And I will assure you, as somebody who has, and I think anybody who's been here during previous government shutdowns, I will assure you that there is pain, and the pain will not be inflicted on any of us in this room. It'll be inflicted on our constituents, and sometimes the most vulnerable constituents. The final thing I'm simply going to say is that, you know, I don't understand why everybody was sent home except us, because we could have started this tomorrow, all right? And I get it, you know, we have the holidays, but we could have gotten something done tomorrow. I mean, now we don't come back until Tuesday. And we have.
It's like the French work week.
We have to do a rule, and the rule gets brought up on Tuesday, but the bills don't come until Wednesday, right? So, I mean, and so, well, whatever it is, we all want a better way forward, but we're dealing with where we are right now. And I would just urge those who believe that we shouldn't shut the government down, whatever it is that you can get the votes on, do it sooner rather than later, because we are running out of time. And that's just, you know, I think a government shutdown is a disaster. I get where Mr. Gaetz is coming from, Mr. Biggs. I hear where you're coming from, Mr. Rosedale. I get it. I'm not here to question your motives. I'm just simply saying, but for those of us who think it is a bad thing, I mean, what the hell are we waiting for? And so, in any event, I appreciate your candor, and I will yield back my time.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you were here because I made a personal plea. I said I've not spent enough